Hey, I'm Ethan. I'm 28, originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. Until about 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. A stable job as an auto technician, a house I saved years to buy, and a wife I believed I'd grow old with. Turns out life had other plans. My marriage fell apart in the ugliest way possible. My wife betrayed me repeatedly. At first, I forgave her, thinking it was just a terrible mistake. I wanted to believe in second chances. But when the affairs became blatant, even public, I realized I had been holding on to something that never truly existed. The final straw came when I overheard her bragging to her friends about how easily I always took her back. I packed my bags that night. I sold the house, left my job, and decided I needed a complete reset. I searched for a place where no one knew my name, somewhere peaceful where I could just breathe again. That place turned out to be a small town in northern Oregon. A sleepy little community surrounded by pine trees and rolling hills. I found a modest two-bedroom house on the outskirts with a white picket fence, an old oak tree in the front yard, and a wraparound porch that made it feel like home the moment I stepped onto it. The day I moved in was cold and overcast. My breath hung in the air as I unloaded the last of my things from the rented truck. The street was quiet except for the sound of wind stirring fallen leaves. I remember standing there for a moment feeling like I was standing at the edge of something unknown but necessary. For the first few weeks, I kept mostly to myself. I'd wake up, go for long walks, visit the local diner for coffee, and work on small repairs around the house. The townspeople were friendly but respected my space. I liked that. I wasn't ready to talk yet. The houses on my street were charming, most of them older but well cared for. It didn't take long for me to notice the woman who lived next door. She had this quiet presence about her, always tending to her garden, watering plants along the walkway, sometimes sitting on her porch with a book. She had dark auburn hair that fell just past her shoulders, soft features, and eyes that held something I couldn't quite name. I later learned her name was Vivian. At first, our exchanges were simple nod, small waves, a polite smile when we happened to cross paths. One day, I was carrying in a heavy box of tools when I heard a gentle voice. "Need a hand?" I turned to see Vivian standing at the end of my driveway wearing a light cardigan over jeans holding a watering can. I smiled awkwardly. "I'm good, but thanks. These just look heavier than they really are." She smiled back, gave me a small wave, and walked off toward her yard. I remember watching her go and thinking there was something calming about her energy, something that made the air feel lighter. Over the next few days, we bumped into each other more often at the mailbox at the grocery store. On one occasion, she even brought over a plate of homemade banana bread. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said shyly. I laughed. "You didn't have to do that," she shrugged. "Old habits. My mom used to say if food was the best way to greet new people." The banana bread was good. Really good. Little by little, I started to look forward to those short encounters. There wasn't much conversation, but there was comfort in knowing someone was there, someone real. Still, I noticed she never mentioned a husband, partner, or kids. I figured she preferred her privacy just like I did, and I respected that. One Sunday morning, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee. Vivian was in her front yard trimming some rose bushes. I debated with myself for a good 10 minutes before finally standing up and walking over. "Those look like a lot of work," I said, pointing at the roses. She smiled softly. "They are, but they're worth it. Kind of like life, huh?" I joked. Her smile faded slightly and her eyes softened as if the words had hit somewhere deeper. "Yeah, something like that." We stood in silence for a moment. I didn't know her story. She didn't know mine. But somehow in that silence, it felt like we understood each other just a little more. Two strangers, both starting over in their own way. I walked back to my porch and sipped my coffee again, watching her gently brush her fingers across a blooming rose. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. I had no idea then just how much Vivian would end up meaning to me. The next few weeks slipped by like pages turning in a well-worn book. I settled into the rhythms of this quiet town. My mornings started with black coffee on the porch, and my days were filled with small projects around the house or trips to the local hardware store. The evenings were the hardest. That's when the ghosts of my past tried to creep back in. The anger, the betrayal, the questions without answers. It was during one of those long evenings that I saw Vivian walking her dog. I didn't even know she ended up being a small, wiry terrier with a comically oversized collar. I smiled. "I like your sidekick." She laughed, something soft and musical that I realized I hadn't heard before. "This is Murphy. He's my shadow." Murphy trotted over and sniffed my shoe's tail, wagging furiously. I knelt and scratched behind his ears. "Hi, Murphy. I'm calling you a new neighbor." Vivian smiled. "We figured that out. It became a pattern. We would randomly run into each other at the grocery store, walking the neighborhood, even at the tiny farmer's market on Saturdays. Each encounter chipped away at the wall I had built around myself. One afternoon, I saw her struggling with bags of soil from her car trunk. I walked over without thinking. "Let me help." She gave me a grateful nod. "Thanks." I overestimated my strength again. I carried the heavy bags to her garden and set them down by her flower beds. The soil smelled rich, the roses bright against the fading sunlight. "You've got a real talent with these," I said. "I try. My husband always said I had a green thumb," she answered softly. The word husband lingered in the air between us, but I didn't push. I wasn't ready to share my mess either. We both had our ghosts. A few days later, I was standing in my backyard grilling a couple of burgers for dinner when I spotted Vivian pruning her hydrangeas. On impulse, I waved her over. "Hey, would you like to join me for dinner? I made too much." Vivian hesitated. I could tell she wasn't used to spontaneous invitations. "You sure?" "Yeah," I said. "It's just me and the sound of crickets back here." I got a small smile out of her. A few minutes later, she walked through the open gate carrying a bottle of red wine. "I figured wine goes with everything," she said. We sat under the string lights I had clumsily hung across the fence. Murphy lay curled at Vivian's feet while we talked about everything and nothing, the best coffee in town, how unpredictable Oregon weather could be, even a stray raccoon that had taken up residence in my attic last week. After a second glass of wine, something shifted. We talked about why we both ended up in this sleepy town. I told her I came here after a bad breakup. I didn't go into detail, not yet. She nodded quietly and stared at the sky. "I came here after my husband passed. I needed to get away from reminders." I felt a lump in my throat. My problem suddenly felt small. I set down my glass. "Vivian, I'm so sorry." Her eyes glistened faintly in the porch light. "Thank you. It's been a few years. You learn to live with the hole in your chest." The crickets seemed louder after that. Neither of us spoke for a long while. It wasn't awkward. It was real. Later, as the night grew colder, I walked her back toward her gate. She turned and smiled softly. "Thank you, Ethan. This was nice. I forgot how nice it feels to just talk." I smiled back. "Me too." The next few days, I found myself thinking about her more than I wanted to admit. There was something grounding about Vivian. She wasn't flashy or trying to impress anyone. She just was. And somehow that quiet strength pulled me in. The next Saturday, I worked up the nerve to knock on her door. Murphy barked excitedly as she opened it. "Hey," I said. "I was thinking I'm planning to fire up the grill again later. You are welcome to join if you're free." She tilted her head, amused. "Ethan, are you asking me on a neighborly dinner date?" I laughed, feeling my cheeks flush slightly. "Maybe," she chuckled. "I'll bring dessert." That evening felt different, less casual. We lingered a little longer at the table, our conversations a little deeper. When the meal was done and the stars blanketed the sky, I surprised myself by saying it. "I think I'm starting to fall for you, Vivian." She froze. I saw her shoulders tense as she stared down at her glass. When she finally looked at me, her expression was tender, but firm. "I'm a widow, Ethan. You deserve someone young and free." Her words hit harder than I expected. I sat back, momentarily speechless. I had guessed she was alone, but I had never expected that. I nodded slowly. "I understand." She smiled faintly, her eyes softening. "You're kind. I don't want to lead you somewhere I can't follow." I didn't push. I didn't beg. I just said, Thank you for being honest. I walked home under the stars, thinking I had made a mistake. But somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that her words didn't quite match the look in her eyes. The next few days were strange. I kept myself busy tackling repairs I had been putting off: the loose porch rail, the leaky faucet, organizing tools in the garage. Anything to distract me from thinking about Vivian's words. I'm a widow. You deserve someone young and free. I replayed it over and over. I wasn't angry or hurt. I just couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't truly meant it. I had seen the way she looked at me before she spoke, as if something inside her wanted to say yes, but couldn't. One warm Sunday afternoon, I found myself wandering to the small cafe in town. As I sat outside with my coffee, I heard the familiar click of Murphy's leash and Vivian's soft voice calling his name. Our eyes met. I gave her a polite nod, expecting nothing more. But to my surprise, she walked over. Mind if I sit? Not at all, I replied. She ordered an iced tea, and for a while we just talked like before. The conversation was light at first: weather, gardening, even Murphy's antics. It was comfortable, but I could sense she was working up to something. Finally, Vivian took a deep breath and stared out at the street. I think I owe you an explanation. I shook my head. You don't owe me anything. I do, she said softly. You've been nothing but kind. I haven't told you everything. I leaned back in my chair, waiting. She smiled sadly. I met my husband Miles when I was 24. We were young and stupid and madly in love. We built a life together from nothing. We worked, saved, traveled, dreamed about starting a family one day. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. When I turned 36, Miles started feeling sick. At first, we thought it was nothing to stress, but it wasn't. It was cancer, aggressive, unforgiving. I spent 2 years taking care of him. 2 years watching the person I loved fade away in front of me. I sat in stunned silence, my chest tightening as I listened. He died holding my hand. She blinked back tears. We never got to have kids. That was always my biggest dream, to be a mother. After Miles passed, I couldn't stay in our house. It was too full of memories of plans we never got to finish. I sold it and moved here to start over. She looked down at her teeing circles on the glass. I've spent the last 4 years alone. I got used to it. I thought it was what I wanted. I swallowed hard, not sure what to say. Vivian finally met my gaze. Then you moved in next door, and for the first time I felt something again. Something terrifying. I didn't know if I had the right to feel it. I reached across the table and gently touched her hand. Vivian, you're allowed to live again, to be happy. She smiled faintly. I know. I just never thought I would meet someone like you. We sat in silence for a moment, her hand still resting under mine. It was the first real contact we had shared since that night in my backyard. It felt natural, not forced, like two people slowly learning to trust again. I took a deep breath and opened up. Too. I haven't exactly had it easy either. My wife cheated on me over and over. I forgave her every time because I thought love meant staying no matter what. I thought I could fix it, but I couldn't. Vivian squeezed my hand gently. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I nodded. I don't want to carry that bitterness with me anymore. Moving here was my way of starting over. I get that, she whispered. Later that evening, I invited Vivian and Murphy to join me for a walk along the wooded trail behind our street. The sun was low, casting golden light through the trees. We walked side by side, talking easily, as if that conversation had unlocked something between us. At one point, Murphy darted ahead to chase a squirrel, and Vivian laughed. A real unguarded laugh that made my chest tighten in the best way. As we reached a small clearing overlooking the distant hills, we stopped. The view was breathtaking, but I barely noticed. I looked at her instead. Her auburn hair glowed softly in the sunset. She stared out at the horizon, her expression peaceful, almost hopeful. I wanted to say something, anything, but I hesitated. Vivian turned to me, her voice gentle. Thank you for listening, for not judging me. I smiled. Thank you for trusting me. We stood there for a long while, watching the sky shift from pink to purple to deep blue. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just two people, both carrying scars, both standing at the edge of something new and unknown. As we walked back toward our houses under the starlit sky, my hand brushed against hers. I felt her fingers hesitate, then intertwined with mine. Neither of us said a word. We didn't have to. Something had shifted between Vivian and me after that walk. It was subtle at first. Small gestures, longer conversations, quiet smiles that lingered just a little longer. I found myself looking forward to any excuse to see her, even if it was something as simple as borrowing a gardening tool or offering to help carry groceries from her car. I noticed the changes in her, too. The way her expression softened when she saw me. The way her laughter became easier, freer. It was like we were both slowly, cautiously stepping out of the shadows of our past. One Friday evening, I gathered the courage to take the next step. I knocked on her door holding a small bouquet of wildflowers I had picked from the field near the walking trail. Murphy barked from inside and Vivian opened the door with a surprised smile. "For you," I said, handing her the flowers. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she accepted them. "They're beautiful." "Thank you." "I was wondering." I began suddenly feeling nervous if you'd like to go out to dinner with me. A real date. Vivian looked at me for a long moment. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the internal battle she was fighting. "I'd love to," she finally said softly. We decided on a cozy little Italian restaurant on the edge of town. The place had dim lighting, checkered tablecloths, and the kind of charm only small-town restaurants seem to have. As we sat across from each other, sharing plates of pasta and sipping red wine, I realized how easy it was to be around her. There was no pressure to be perfect. We were just two people enjoying each other's company. We talked about everything. Our childhoods, favorite movies, music, travel, dreams. I told her about my failed attempts at cooking, and she admitted she couldn't swim despite living near the coast for years. We laughed, we listened, we connected. After dinner, we walked along the riverfront, the cool breeze weaving through the trees. The moon cast a soft glow over the water. As we stood at the railing, looking out at the reflections on the river, I gently reached for her hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. We stood there in silence, hand in hand, neither of us needing to fill the space with words. The days that followed felt lighter. I started leaving small surprises for her: fresh flowers from the market, a cup of her favorite coffee from the diner, even a funny card once just to see her smile. Vivian, in turn, began inviting me over more often. I'd find myself sitting at her kitchen table talking for hours as she prepared dinner. Sometimes we'd watch old movies in her living room with Murphy curled between us. Other times, we simply sat outside under the stars wrapped in blankets, sharing quiet moments. The first time I kissed her was unexpected. We were walking home from a market, bags of produce in hand, when it started to rain. We ran for cover under the awning of the local bakery. Both of us were laughing as the rain poured down around us. I looked at her, her hair damp and clinging to her face, her eyes bright with laughter. I couldn't stop myself. I leaned in and she met me halfway. The kiss was soft, tentative, but full of emotion. It felt like the closing of one chapter in the beginning of something entirely new. Afterward, we stood there, her head resting lightly against my shoulder as the rain continued to fall. "Are you sure about this?" I whispered. She nodded against me. "I've never been more sure of anything." From that night on, we became inseparable. Our relationship blossomed naturally without drama or games. I cherished every moment with her. The way she absent-mindedly hummed when she cooked. How she'd sneak extra treats to Murphy. When she thought I wasn't looking, the way her hand always found mine when we walked side by side. One evening, I surprised her with a small gift, a silver necklace with a delicate rose charm. "For your garden queen," I said with a grin. She laughed and kissed me. "You're impossible." But I could see the emotion behind her eyes as she placed the necklace around her neck. We talked openly about our pasts, our fears, our hopes for the future. Vivian confessed that she still struggled with guilt for moving on after Miles. I told her that healing doesn't mean forgetting and that she deserved happiness, too. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she whispered one night as we lay on her couch, watching the flicker of the fireplace. "Neither did I," I replied. brushing a strand of hair from her face. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of doubt, moments when the age difference or the weight of our pasts made us pause. But we always came back to each other stronger for it. By the end of that fall, as the leaves turned fiery red and gold, I knew I wanted a future with her. I just wasn't sure yet how I was going to ask. It was early spring, the kind where the mornings still held a chill, but the afternoons hinted at warmth. I had spent weeks planning. I didn't want the proposal to feel grand or over the top. Vivian wasn't that type of person. I wanted it to be quite meaningful. I invited her for a picnic at our favorite spot, the overlook at the end of the wooded trail behind our neighborhood. From that ridge, you could see the entire valley below, rolling hills, clusters of pines, and the small town we had both come to call home. Vivian had no idea. She thought it was just another one of our afternoon picnics. When I picked her up, she smiled warmly, wearing a soft denim jacket over a light sweater. Murphy trotted happily at her side. "I packed some sandwiches," she said, holding up a small cooler. "I brought the blanket," I replied, trying to sound casual while my heart raced. We hiked the familiar trail, stopping occasionally to let Murphy explore. The conversation was light. She told me about a new plant she wanted to add to her garden. I nodded and listened, secretly, checking that the small box in my jacket pocket was still there. At the top of the ridge, we laid out the blanket and sat side by side. The sun was starting its slow descent, casting golden light over everything. We ate, laughed, and simply enjoyed the quiet. As the last rays of sunlight brushed across the sky, I shifted nervously. Viv must have sensed something because she turned and gave me a questioning look. "You're awfully quiet tonight," she teased. I took a deep breath. "Viv, I've been thinking about this for a long time." Her smile softened. "What is it?" I pulled the small velvet box from my pocket and opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. Her breath caught. "Vivian, I know life didn't turn out the way either of us expected. We've both been hurt. We've both lost and we've both healed. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you." I knelt down on one knee, the cool breeze tugging at my jacket. "Will you marry me?" She stared at me, wide-eyed, tears already forming in her eyes. She covered her mouth with her hand, and for a moment, the world stood still. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Ethan, I never thought I'd feel this again. I told myself I'd never allow anyone into my heart like this." I stayed still, waiting. She reached down, took my hand, and whispered, "Yes, yes, I will." I slipped the ring under her finger and she laughed through her tears as I stood and pulled her into a tight embrace. Murphy barked excitedly, running circles around us. We stood there for a long time holding each other as the sky turned from pink to deep indigo. As we walked back down the trail under a canopy of stars, Vivian held my hand tightly. "You do know what you're signing up for," she joked softly. "I know you're older," I said. "I know there are people who will question it. I don't care. I love you. That's all I care about." She stopped walking and faced me. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air. For a second, I thought I had misheard. I stared at her, stunned. "You're what?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they were happy. "I found out last week. I wanted to be sure before I told you. I'm almost 4 months along." I stood there completely speechless. Slowly, I broke into a grin and pulled her into my arms. "We're having a baby," she nodded, laughing and crying at the same time. "I never thought I'd get to be a mom," she whispered against my chest. "And I never thought I'd get to be a dad," I replied, brushing my hand over her back. "I guess life had other plans for both of us." The following months passed in a beautiful blur. We had a small, intimate wedding in the local chapel, surrounded by close friends and neighbors who had watched our story unfold from a distance. Vivian walked down the aisle in a simple ivory dress, her growing bump visible beneath the fabric. I had never seen her more radiant. After we exchanged vows, the applause was warm and genuine. Even Murphy, dressed in a ridiculous tiny tuxedo, seemed to understand the importance of the moment. Married life brought new joys, preparing the nursery, late-night talks about baby names, gentle walks around the neighborhood hand in hand. We weren't a perfect couple. There were moments of worry, fears of what the future held, but we faced them the way we had faced everything else together. The day our son was born was the most emotional of my life. Vivian held him against her chest with tears of absolute joy streaming down her cheeks. I stood by her, sighted, overwhelmed, knowing that this was the family I had always longed for. As I cradled my son for the first time, I looked at Vivian. She smiled back at me, exhausted, but glowing. "I love you," I whispered. "I love you too," she replied. We had defied the odds, silenced the doubts, and built something real. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were husband and wife. We were parents. We were home. The story of Ethan and Vivian imparts a deeply moving life lesson about the courage to embrace love and healing after profound loss. It teaches us that life's most beautiful moments often emerge from the ashes of pain when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and open to new beginnings. Ethan, scarred by betrayal, and Vivian, haunted by the loss of her husband, found solace in each other's quiet presence, proving that genuine connection can transcend age, past wounds, and societal expectations. Their journey underscores the importance of patience, honesty, and mutual respect in building something real, showing that love doesn't demand perfection, but thrives on shared understanding and resilience. Vivian's hesitation and eventual acceptance of love remind us that healing is not about erasing the past, but about finding the strength to carry it forward with hope. This story is a testament to the transformative power of second chances, urging us to trust in life's unexpected gifts and to cherish the people who see us for who we truly are. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever found love or healing in an unexpected place? Your stories inspire us all to embrace life's surprises. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to join our community of heartfelt storytelling. Let's keep celebrating the lessons that shape our lives together.